You can use all of these strategies in ways that are both good for and bad for your child. And you'll see what I mean as we dive into some basic answers, some basic strategies that I think that you're going to find pretty helpful most of the time, but you'll see how sometimes they can run roughshod over our children's autonomy. So here's the first basic answer. Number one, keep it simple. In the chat, and the chat has been super active during this webinar, something that's come up a few times is the importance of keeping things really nice and simple for our kids. We don't want to give them too many directions, just one thing at a time, or maybe 2 or 3 things at a time, depending on the age of your child and the things that they're being asked to do. It may be that you have a routine. The routine has 4 things. It might be in our home at about 8 o'clock, we call out toilet, teeth, hair, and prayer. Okay, they're the 4 things that everyone knows that they have to do. That's the routine. And we can say toilet, teeth, hair, and prayer because it sort of rhymes, and that you've got TT for toilet and teeth. So you've got the what do you call that? Starts with A. Alliteration. You've got the alliteration with toilet and teeth, and then hair and prayer rhyme, and it kind of rolls off the tongue, and the kids have heard it again and again and again and again, and they know that they're the 4 things that they need to do so that they can get ready for bed, dive into bed, we can finish off the nighttime routine. It keeps it simple. So either have a simple routine that you can follow. Thank you, Alex, alliteration. I knew I would get there eventually. Either have the routine that you can follow, that they're familiar with, and that the repetition just sinks in eventually. So even though you've got a kid who's got ADHD, even if they're inattentive, you'll be able to move them through that because they can hang on to it. They can. It's sticky in their mind. Otherwise, just one thing at a time. And I know that sounds like micromanagement, but if you want to get stuff done, just one thing at a time. Now, you don't just want to keep it simple. The next thing that you need to do is be on their level. So often as parents, we call out from the kitchen to the living room. Hey, I've asked you 4 times now. I told you to go and do that thing. And they're not listening. But when we get on their level, when we walk over to them and crouch down in front of them, and when we say, hey, I need you to do something for me just now. Do you know what it is? When we are soft, but we're making eye contact, they kind of get it, right? Like they can't not hear you. Which leads me to the third idea, and that is that we want them to repeat it back. This can work in a couple of different ways. You can be on their level, you can be crouched down, you can say, I'd like you to do this for me, please. And then you can say, did you catch that? Because it looks like you're still staring at the TV. What did I ask you to do? In other words, you're getting them to repeat it back. Or what you could also do is you can say, there's 4 things that we have to do before bed. What are they? Because they're used to the routine. But when you get them to repeat it back, what that tells you really clearly is they know what's expected. It doesn't guarantee that they'll do it, but the fact that you're there, you're keeping it simple, you're on their level, and they're repeating it back, that tells you that they know the expectation. They understand it. It's not foolproof, but we're heading in the right direction. Joanne says, sometimes it's great to ask in a different way. Super early meeting for me equals stress. So I pretended I was a firefighter and we had to get ready and go fast like a firefighter. So that's really helpful as well. I love that, Joe. And it's not one of my strategies in the session here. That will work really, really well for a 6-year-old. It won't work well at all for a 16-year-old. Your 16-year-old will roll her eyes at you and will then go slower just to annoy you. Larissa highlights, one of my children hates it when I ask them to repeat it, but it works so well for my others that I forget to change my approach with them. And I'm really glad that you've highlighted that because, again, for some children, it can feel ultra coercive. It can feel like we're being really manipulative. And so the way that we approach it's really gentle. I might walk over to one of my kids and sit beside her and put my arm around her and say, hey, I asked you to do something a couple of minutes ago and you're still sitting here on the couch. What did I ask you to do? Did you hear me? Or do I need to say it again? And she'll either roll her eyes and go, oh, you told me to go and brush my teeth. Or she'll say, I didn't hear, Dad. What did you say? And so it's a really gentle way of saying it. We just get to say, I asked you to do something. Did you catch it? Or do I need to say it again? And that's that whole repeat it back thing. Kylie says, I asked my 6-year-old son, what am I going to say? Or what am I going to ask? He can always respond correctly. Whereas if I ask him, he'll get cranky. Yeah, so this is a really great way of doing it. That repeat it back, or that asking them to tell you what needs to be done, it's the same kind of principle. But it really does depend on the characteristics and temperament of your child. Kelly's jumped into the chat as well and said it's too intimidating for my child, won't do it. So again, these basic answers work for most kids most of the time, but they won't work perfectly for everyone because we've got so many different kinds of kids. My favorite strategy in the basic answers, and I've still got a couple to go after this one, but my favorite one is to speak more quietly. You see, when we feel like the kids aren't listening, which really means when our kids aren't complying, we've been over that, right? What we tend to do is we tend to get louder, we tend to get angrier, we tend to blow up more, we tend to really let people know that they're clearly not listening, and so we're going to talk louder, and it's just horrible. How do you feel when someone talks loudly to you? Do you look at them and say, oh, well, now you're yelling at me? I get your point, and I'm so glad. Thanks for making sure that I could hear you. Because the issue isn't that they're deaf. They're not deaf, except in the occasional case where we do know that we've got a medical issue. What we do when we speak quietly is softly and gently say, I've asked you to do something. Did you hear what I asked you to do? I don't know if my microphone's picking me up whispering, but what's amazing about it is that the softer you speak, the more your kids lean in, the closer they get, the more they want to hear what you're saying because you're speaking softly. It's extraordinary what happens. In fact, if you only take one thing from this webinar, maybe that'll be the thing. I don't think it will be, but certainly from our basic answers, it's amazing. The other great thing is when you speak quietly, you tend to keep it simple. You tend to get on their level. You don't need to get them to repeat it back, but it's really easy to. It just makes it so much easier. Okay, Alex highlights, I'm getting to the point that I want my son to have some autonomy and do things without being asked. You and the rest of us, Alex, and it will happen. What's ironic is that as you give him more autonomy, as you step back, as you stop being so directive, he will start doing stuff. But he's always going to need, depending on his age, a little bit of a gentle poke and prod. My next answer is gentle touch. I saw that in the chat a little bit earlier. A lot of people were mentioning it, but I didn't want to pick up on it then because it's coming up here. It's amazing what happens when you walk up to one of your children and you just squeeze their elbow, you put your arm around them. When you put your hands on their shoulders and look into their eyes. And I mean, we've got someone like Monique who jumps into the chat and says, if I whisper, my kids just go, yay, I don't need to listen. And that's why we need to touch them gently. Or that's why we need to get them to repeat it back. Or that's why we need to get on their level. That's why all of these strategies need to work either in harmony together or in response to your child's unique temperament. Number 6, drop the don't. This is another really simple one. Which is why I've got in the basic answers, but drop the don't basically means that we don't say don't. Don't say don't. Does that make sense? Do say do. So when we say to our child, don't do that, don't make so much noise, don't bang the pots, don't slam the door, don't do this, don't do that, they have to process 2 different things. Number 1, they've got something that they have to stop doing. But then number 2, they've got to work out what to do instead. And because there's a good chance that they might be a bit emotionally flooded, high emotions, low intelligence, you're asking them to not do something, you're saying don't, but they are really zeroed in. They've got this narrow tunnel vision happening right now because they're so emotional, they're so upset. And so when we say don't do this, all they actually hear is, well, they don't hear the don't, they just hear do this. Don't yell at me. And so they hear yell at me. Don't bang things so loudly, and all I hear is bang things so loudly. Like the word don't does register, but they just don't even know where to go beyond that. Paul has said same as training the puppy. Our kids are more sophisticated than puppies, Paul, but I'll give you that one in this instance. Tell them what you want them to do. Anything else confuses them or distracts them. So if the kids are fighting, we might say, hey guys, kind and calm, or soft hands. Or we might step into the room and say, you're all so upset right now. Let's just have a hug. Let's have a group hug and figure this out. It depends on the age of your children again. Okay, that might sound simplistic, but you know what I mean. We're focusing on what we do want them to do, not what we don't want them to do. Kerry highlights, again, with neurodivergence, ADHD, they lose the instruction. You've got to tell them what you want them to do. I'm just laughing at Marty's comment. Can you please bang a little quieter? I love it. Well done. So drop the don't, and I like that, Marty. Use the phrase, can you please, instead of don't do this, can you please, is a great way to go. The last one for our basic answers is this one. Find a way to say yes. Find a way to say yes. When the kids say, can I do this or do that? Can I whatever? You might say, yeah, of course you can. On the weekend, we're going to have some time for that and we'll do it then. Or can I, whatever it is that they want to do, can I eat ice cream for breakfast? Well, you can have some ice cream. We'll have it a little bit later today after we've had some healthy food. Can I? And so we're looking for ways that we can say yes, but we might be deferring, might be kicking things down the road. When we say yes, our kids listen, they tune in more. They will still experience disappointment, but they're not going to experience it the same way that they'll experience it when we're yelling, when we're shouting, when we're criticizing, condemning, when we're accusing them of not listening, when we're calling them names for being so painful. So that is the list of basic answers.